Hey there, hope you're well. In this video I'll be taking a quick look at these cheap surface clamps that I bought off BangGood to see how they compare to the original Festool items. In fact, let's dive right in. The whole idea behind these clamps is that they grip a board by its edges to keep it in place, leaving the surface completely free of any hold downs, so no toggles, no clamp heads, nothing to get in the way of whatever it is you're doing, whether that's sanding, routing or some other process. Now the clamp comes in two parts, a simple stop and the actual clamp with the lever, clamp head, bar and body, and these both locate in the 20mm holes of the standard MFT top. Fairly obviously the stops go in one of the dog holes and your workpiece bears against this. You find another dog hole to fit the clamp into, adjust the head and pull the lever to clamp it tightly. It's simple, quick and effective. So these surface clamps, or clamping elements as they were called when I bought mine, are one of those odd products that are almost unique, if I can mangle the grammar. In fact, other than Festool, the original Festool items, I know of only one other company that's made this type of clamp, and they were the folks behind the old Walco bench system. As far as I can tell, they're not made, or certainly not available anymore. Now these clamps are not cheap. I paid around £70 for a pair of these almost a decade ago, and they're closer to £90 now, but despite that, they're some of my favourite and most used clamps, so I was particularly interested when I saw a set of these on BangGood for about £26 back in January, so I bought a set to see how they compared. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Festool clamps were simple, quick and effective, but unfortunately there's a bit of a flaw with them. To accommodate different sizes of workpiece, the bar of the clamp has to be a decent length, and as you get towards the limit of that length, the maximum capacity of the clamp, then physics takes over and the clamps always lift the board slightly. Now this isn't necessarily a huge problem. They remain one of my favourite ways to clamp a board in place, but if you do need the workpiece to be held absolutely flat on the bench top, then it does present some issues. Now Festool are aware of this and they supply a couple of threaded knobs that you can use to secure the clamps down to the bench from underneath to prevent that lift off. Whilst this doesn't cure the issue completely, it certainly helps, but it also turns clamping a board down into much more of a palaver if you have to scramble around under the bench just to clamp down the clamps that are clamping down the workpiece. Suddenly, they're not quite so quick or simple to use after all. It's clear too that the cheap and cheerful BangGood clamps suffer from the same basic design problem as well, as you not only get a set of knobs for the clamps, but also for the static stops too. And these are very effective, has to be said, more so than on the Festool clamps. The cheap clamps also have longer threaded rods, so they can be used in thicker bench tops too, not just in the standard MFT top. In fact, it is a pretty comprehensive kit that you get for your £26, well presented in a box with foam cutouts, all very neat and tidy. In use, the clamps may understandably lack the finesse of the Festool originals, but they work well enough, and although the Festool items seem to exert a little more pressure, as long as you're not expecting to be able to use them for glue-ups, the cheap clamps do seem capable of doing the job just fine, except they also have a bit of a design flaw. Now, I said that the Festool clamps were designed to hold the workpiece by the edges, leaving the surface completely clear, and the Festool clamps are made so that they fit just below the surface of what is probably the most common material thickness, an 18mm or 3/4 inch board. Unfortunately, the cheap and cheerful clamp makers haven't thought that way at all, and these clamp heads and stops are actually 21mm thick, so they stand proud of the surface by around 3mm or 1/8 of an inch. This isn't necessarily a disaster, as it's easy enough to pack the workpiece off the bench top with a few pieces of 3mm scrap. Or maybe use some bench top protectors like these ones from Bench Dogs. They'll also help keep the workpiece in place and unmarked. Or perhaps you usually work with thicker material like this 22mm board, so it's not going to be an issue for you. Whatever, it does seem to be a bit of a shame though that such a useful clamp is slightly marred by such a clear and obvious flaw that could so easily have been dealt with in the design stages. Now, obviously, we don't know the whole story here, and maybe there are patent or IP issues that can be avoided, let's say, by using thicker clamp heads and stops. But I think that the bottom line is that if you don't already have a set of these Festool surface clamps or clamping elements, then the cheap and cheerful BangGood options aren't bad at all, and really very good value for the money. And let's be honest, you can buy 2 pairs of these clamps and a set of the Bench Dogs bench top protectors for less than the best street price of these original Festool clamps. You pays your money and you makes your choice. That's it for this week's shorter video though. It turns out there's only so much you can say about clamps. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you found it useful. If you did, then consider subscribing for more weekly workshop videos, or come and join the Patreon party at patreon.com/10minute workshop for additional exclusive content. And I'd like to say thank you very much indeed to all the folks who do just that, as their contributions really do help me to keep the lights on here and make it possible for me to make regular, freely available content like this for the 10-Minute Workshop channel. But that really is it for this week though. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care. So these surface clamps, or clamping elements as they were called when I bought mine, are one of those products that are almost unique if I can mangle the grammar. In fact, other than these Festool original items, I know of only one other company that's made this type of lever compression clamp, and that was the folks behind the old Walco bench system. As far as I can tell, they're not available, or certainly... Do that bit again. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Festool clamps were simple, quick and effective. Festool are aware of this and they supply a couple of threaded knobs. In fact, hang on. Just in case I'm still talking. Now, Festool are aware of this and they supply a couple of threaded knobs that you can use to secure the clamps down to the bench from underneath to prevent that lift off. Static stops too, and these are very effective, has to be said, more so than on the Festool clamps. The cheap clamps also have a longer and these are very effective, in fact more so than on the Festool clamps. The cheap clamps also have longer threaded rods, so they can be used in the